Number 5 is Slaughterhouse Canyon. Slaughterhouse Canyon is home to one of the most tragic stories I have ever heard. In the early 1800s, a family lived remotely in this area. There were 4 of them: the mother, the father, and 2 children. The father would travel into this canyon and have to leave his family for extended periods of time. These trips were for food, money, clothes, anything to assist his family's survival. One day during his journey, he was lost to the rocks and did not return. Without the assistance from the father, the remainder of the family started to starve. Slowly dying of famine and having no resources, the family, and most specifically the mother, lost her mind. Her madness reached a state that she could no longer come back from, and the incessant bawling of her children for food became too loud in her mind to bear. Dressing herself in her wedding gown, she walked her children to a nearby river and threw them in it to let them drown in the water. Realizing what she had done, her cries filled and echoed throughout the canyon until not long after, she finally perished to starvation herself. It is said that this canyon is still haunted by her undead spirit, that anyone who sets foot on these grounds will hear the shrieks that echoed throughout the canyon centuries earlier, and that extended exposure to this area will cause one to lose their mind exactly how the mother did. Many people report having extreme anxiety when in this area and a deep desire to leave. Perhaps that is the mother spirit attempting to warn people of this canyon so no one suffers the same fate that her family did. Regardless of her intentions though, it's safe to say that Slaughterhouse Canyon is deeply haunted. Number 4 is the Devil's Tramping Grounds. This is in reference to a very strange patch of soil in North Carolina. For decades, this circle of dirt has allowed nothing to grow on it, whilst the area surrounding it is home to luscious wildlife. Now there could be any number of reasons for why nothing is growing on this patch of dirt. Simply because an area of land cannot grow wildlife does not automatically mean the devil himself has anything to do with it. However, for this particular spot of land, that just might be the case. Locals have reported putting objects in the center of the circle and coming back a day later to find their items placed right outside of it. There have also been several sightings of deep red glowing eyes in the night. It's widely believed that this specific circle is used by the devil to dance at night, or in some cases, to perform graphic and gruesome rituals. Therefore, if anything is inside his circle, he will move it to the outside. A daring reporter decided to test this theory one evening and slept in that exact spot in a tent. He said that the entire evening he heard the distinct sounds of dancing footprints outside his tent, but couldn't spot anything when he looked outside. Whether it's the devil or a strange phantom creature performing strange phantom rituals, it's clear that something is not right with this dead patch of dirt. Number 3 on this list is Hoia Baciu Forest in Romania. This forest has been regarded by many as potentially the scariest and most dangerous forest on the entire planet. Unlike your typical haunted house that may be haunted by a singular ghost, this forest has a plethora of creatures to watch out for. Ghosts, apparitions, dark shadowy beings, and demons have all been sighted in this forest, with one person even stating that they've seen a UFO before. The general note that almost everyone leaves with is this strange feeling of being watched and a strong sense of anxiety. This has been taken to the extreme on several occasions though. One story I came across detailed a man who lost his mind and swore that he had a run-in with a demon or the devil. Another one describes how campers consistently heard the stomping of horses right outside their tent, but when they went to check outside, nothing was there. There was also a tale of how 2 people went into the forest and overnight, one of them became fascinated with death. So fascinated that he became incredibly morbid and could only speak about death and how he wanted to watch people die. This forest started out as local Romanian folklore, but over the years has garnered some serious attention. The general consensus though is to stay away. Number 2 on our list is the haunted waters of Utah Lake. Utah Lake is a massive body of water that spans 150 square miles. Whilst it's undoubtedly home to a deluge of underwater critters, some of them don't come naturally. On the shores of Utah Lake are a collection of rocks, aptly named the Massacre Rocks. It's said that hundreds of years ago, the area surrounding Utah Lake was occupied by Native Americans. During that period, there was a great famine that was affecting the people in this group. Therefore, mothers of newborn children, rather than subject their child to a life of harsh starvation where they would likely die anyways, were forced by the community to drown these babies in the water of Utah Lake by the Massacre Rocks. It was through this tragedy that Utah Lake became haunted. Many locals of the area believe that the souls of these children still rest at the bottom of this lake to this day. It is undecided whether or not these souls have taken a physical and amphibious form or if they are simply ghostly apparitions. One thing is for certain though, do not go in the water. Approaching the lake, you will start to hear the cries of young children coming from the water. You must fight the urge to go and help that cry. These children, or water babies as they are often referred to, will drag you to the depths of the lake and you will never be seen again. Number 1 on this list is Airedale Asylum, located in Australia. The Airedale Insane Asylum was a mental institute that housed some of Australia's most dangerous criminals for over 100 years. It's said that many deaths occurred in this asylum, averaging roughly 100 per year. Now, it doesn't house any mental patients today, but it is thought that the spirits of these patients are still there. Visitors of the Airedale Insane Asylum often have to leave soon after they've entered due to fainting or feeling unexplained pain or serious nausea. One of the most common things people note is the sound of repeated banging. The sound of somebody smacking their head against the wall rings throughout the asylum, with no one being able to find the origin of it. Some people have reported actually being shoved or bitten with no one in sight. There are also several rooms of this asylum with special characteristics to them. Gary Webb was a longtime patient of this asylum, known to be particularly gruesome. He died a long time ago. However, if you were to tread inside his room, you would still hear the distinctive shout to get out. The former superintendent's office is a place of particular interest as well, since it will give people passing by the unmistakable taste of bitter acid. Which is only too fitting considering the superintendent committed suicide by drinking acid many years earlier. This asylum has seen some horrible atrocities in it amongst its walls, and it's clear that some of them will be locked in there forever.
Coming in at number 5, we have Ozone Disco. What a name, I kind of want to go. In March of 1996, a tragic accident happened in Quezon City's Ozone Disco. The local universities had just done their yearly graduation ceremonies. The students were looking to celebrate, and there was a party being thrown for them at the disco. There were around 350 guests attending that night, even though the building had only been cleared to safely hold 35 people. Due to the large amount of people in such a small place, when the fire broke out, they did not stand much chance of escape. Tragically, around 200 people did not make it out that night. Not only did the fire consume the lives of many, but others were trampled in the chaos of trying to escape. The one fire exit the building had been blocked by the building next door, meaning the large amount of people who fled to it to escape became trapped. It was reported that when entering the building to look for survivors, the bodies were piled up waist high. Survivors of the fire explained how around midnight sparks started flying from the DJ booths shortly after smoke appeared. Partygoers thought it was part of the experience, that it was all pyrotechnics to mark the new day. This meant that many did not flee as soon as they should have. All of this combined into a huge tragedy that claimed the lives of so many who were just about to start their lives. Since the incident, the club has been closed and abandoned. However, those who are around the club at night have witnessed some paranormal activity. Some have heard music coming from the club's doors or seen disco lights from a distance. You might think these are just kids who have snuck into party, but others have heard disturbing screams for help, but as they got closer to investigate, the screams fade away. There is a clear warning to those who might try to visit the place today that it's not safe. You might meet a paranormal spirit angry from the tragedy, or you might have a dangerous accident of your own. Coming in at number 4, we have Malcanan Palace. Malcanan Palace is the White House of the Philippines. It is the official residence and principal workplace for the President of the Philippines. It was originally built in 1750, so it has a long history, making it perfect for some paranormal happenings. The building has been home to many important people, but has also been a part of revolutions within the country, leading to many tragic passings on the property. In particular, there is one story that during one of the revolts by the people, they stormed and seized the home. They found one presidential worker who is now unknown and made their own justice. Although this is not a confirmed story, it is often told to explain one of the paranormal guests who has been pictured outside of the home. They have been named the Headless Ghost. The photo captured shows the outside of the palace with a headless figure facing the camera. It is thought that this poor soul was separated with his head before passing and now walks the halls searching for it. He's not the only ghost that has been spotted on the premises though. There have been sightings of former presidents, such as Manuel Quezon and Manuel Roxas. There is also a report where Governor Amy Marcos, daughter of Ferdinand Marcos, actually saw Quezon's ghost at one point during her father's presidency. I guess when you dedicate your life to serving as president, it is hard to let go of the place you call home. If you were to visit, maybe keep your camera handy. You never know who you might just see. Coming in at number 3, we have Clark Air Base Hospital. Clark Air Base Hospital was used during World War II and the Vietnam War. It now lays abandoned on a redeveloped Air Force base. It is said that as soon as you enter the destroyed building, you instantly feel the paranormal energy that belongs there. The locals believe it to be cursed and dare not enter. Due to this, it is seen as the most haunted hospital in the country. The hospital has been ravaged by time, most parts overgrown with greenery, with others simply falling apart. The hospital today does still attract ghost hunters. Due to the amount of pain and suffering that occurred during its time, there are plenty of lost spirits trapped. A number of visitors have reported hearing voices echo through the empty halls of the hospital. Some hear screams. It is said that the voices of those trapped are of the soldiers who lost their lives in the war. It seems they feel they have unfinished business in the world. Many would have left behind their families to serve their country. These are not the only patients still staying there though. The first floor ward was home to the hospital's pediatric center. People have heard the screams of newborn babies and children laughing. One security guard even heard the running footsteps of what sounded like a child. This entity ran straight past him one night while on patrol. He has since refused to patrol within the hospital walls. The hotel did still operate after the war until a nearby volcano erupted, covering the hospital in ash. This was taken as a sign by the locals that nature was warning them to stay away. There are also those who ignore the warnings and venture inside. Just be warned, it seems to have a habit of causing tragedy. Coming in at number 2, we have Laperolle House. The Laperolle House was built by Roberto Laperolle in the 1930s. During World War II, the house was used by Japanese soldiers. They were reportedly a nasty group of brutes. They attacked local women, tortured suspected ties, and even ended their life once they received any information that they had. The house is said to have seen many horrors due to all of this, and the home was never the same after the soldiers left. Those who had been there within this time warned others to stay away. The house transferred ownership after the death of the head of the Laperolle clan. They attempted to maintain the home, but the years and horrors do show on the home's old exterior. The house has withstood much more than those around it, both man-made and natural disasters. To everyone's surprise, the house was still standing after the deadly earthquake of 1990. In 2013, the home was turned into a museum. It was at this point that we started to hear more details about the hauntings inside. The show has been visited on many ghost haunting shows, along with being featured in a film. Those who have visited the house have told of what they found and why the house is visited often by paranormal investigators. One visitor claimed that they heard screams coming from the lower sections of the home. They rushed to go see if someone was hurt, but they found nothing. As they read more about the home, they believe this could have been linked to where the torture happened during the war. Others felt a dark presence in various sections of the home, cold spots or a feeling of sadness that disappeared as quickly as they had felt it. Some said they felt watched, like there is an entity in the home that no one can see, but it is watching all who visit closely. One man claimed he heard water running in the rooms, but when he went to turn it off, there was nothing there, not even a source for any water to be coming from. The home is haunted by the ghosts of the past, but might also hold an ancient entity that causes you to feel watched. Either way, this is not a home I'll be visiting anytime soon. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Manghit Cave. Manghit Cave got its name from the smell of the accumulated bat droppings inside the cave. Located in the central Philippines, this is a scary location due to more than the hauntings. Many people are scared of entering dark and possibly unstable caves, so this one contains more than just the fear of confined spaces. The cave is popular by those who like to explore deep into caves in their spare time, but do it at your own risk. The cave is said to be haunted by lost caving groups. The cave does not offer much light, and the deeper you go, the more lost you get. There have been a number of groups that have gone lost throughout the years with no remains ever recovered. There are so many hidden corners within its maze you will never be found. Those who explore it today have encountered a number of paranormal occurrences. Some report seeing shadows not cast by them or their group, like there is someone else with them. Others have heard footsteps scrambling around as if in panic. Finally, the further in you travel, the more you hear a distant scream of help. Often only one of 2 members of your team will hear this, no matter how far towards the voice you go, it will keep seeming out of reach. This causes people to go further and further into the caving system until their team bring them to their senses to head back. Those who have experienced this believe it may be how the others have gone missing. Some say there may be a demon living deep within the cave looking to bring the lost souls to feast on.
Number 5 on this list is the Myrtles Plantation. The Myrtles Plantation is located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and is home to a plethora of ghosts. The plantation was established in 1796 and is said to have been built on an ancient burial grounds. These burial grounds have obviously contributed to the deep spiritual presence that it has, and the reports that there are 12 different ghosts that currently occupy the space. However, the spirit that is most commonly seen wandering the place wasn't from these burial grounds at all, but an incident that occurred at the plantation many years ago. Chloe, a slave of the plantation in the early 1800s, was eavesdropping one day on a conversation between the family who owned the plantation. The punishment was swift and drastic, and they cut off one of Chloe's ears so that she would never do it again. Chloe obviously didn't take too kindly to this, and even though she knew it would most likely mean her death, wanted to retaliate. She did so by poisoning a birthday cake, which in turn killed 2 of the owner's daughters. For this, she was put to death and executed. However, it is said that Chloe's spirit still wanders the ground to this day and is the most commonly spotted ghost at this plantation. She will be wearing a turban to cover up her ear that was chopped off when she was alive. If you ever see this ghost, people say that you immediately get filled with a deep and solemn depression that hangs over you for quite some time. People speculate that the deep depression that you feel after encountering her may have been the way that she felt while she was alive. Number 4 on this list is the Whaley House. The Whaley House is located in San Diego, California, and is said by some to be the most haunted home in all of the United States. The ghost who haunts the home is not your standard phantom. In fact, it is the spirit of a convicted high-profile robber from the 1850s. Yankee Jim had a good run of thievery, but was inevitably unable to avoid the gallows and was hung off of the back of a wagon in 1852. Thomas Whaley was at that hanging and watched as Yankee Jim died. This did not deter him though from purchasing the very land where it happened. It was at this spot that he proceeded to build what is known today as the Whaley House. It didn't take very long at this home though before the Whaleys quickly realized the errors of their ways. It is said that it took only a few weeks of living there before they started to notice strange ongoings at the home. Doors would slam without anyone around them at all. They may even lock themselves as well with you inside. Footsteps could be heard moving around the home at all hours throughout the day. These footsteps were large, the sound of a big boot attacking the ground, the sound of Yankee Jim. In the entirety of that time the family owned the home, for over 100 years, there was never a time that they said they weren't haunted in this house. After the home was donated and turned into a museum, the sightings became more exaggerated. Different phantoms started appearing, screams were heard, items would float from place to place. A parapsychologist even reported seeing a phantom dog run through the home at one point. Frankly, I don't believe all of these secondary claims. It kind of feels like people's imaginations ran with the idea of having a haunting once it turned into a museum. But I do believe the ghost of Yankee Jim to be a very real thing. If you do go to this home, make sure you have no valuables with you, or Yankee Jim may just claim them for himself. Number 3 on this list is Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. We just spoke about the most haunted home in America, so it's only fitting that we talk about the most haunted cemetery in America. The Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is located in Chicago, Illinois, and has potentially the widest array of ghost stories that I've ever heard of. It's not the biggest graveyard in the world. In fact, it doesn't even operate as one anymore. It was established in the 1840s and practically abandoned in the mid-1900s. There were rumors that the mafia used to use this place as a spot to dump bodies, as it's reasonably secluded and nobody could see them do it. Its secluded nature, rumors tied to the mafia, and the inevitable vandalism that it did receive could all be reasons why it's haunted today. Now, I was talking about the mafia and gangsters. Well, one of the biggest ghostly sightings at this cemetery is actually a gangster car. The graveyard is right next to a road, and people driving down that road have reported seeing the distinct image of a vehicle in the middle of the road resembling a mafia vehicle. People have actually fully swerved off of the road and crashed their own cars, and then later realized that nothing was there at all. Others have seen a whole farmhouse appear in the graveyard, but when they tried to go to it, it completely disappeared. Cars and farmhouses, these are big apparitions and lead me to believe that the spiritual presence in this cemetery has got to be really strong. In 1991, the Chicago Sun released a very famous picture of the graveyard in which there appears to be the figure of a woman sitting on a gravestone, all in white. The photographer behind this picture claims that there wasn't anybody there when he took the picture and it only came up on the camera. With over 100 ghostly sightings in this cemetery, I do believe that it's claimed to be the most haunted cemetery in America. It's well earned. Number 2 on this list is Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Waverly Hills Sanatorium is located in Louisville, Kentucky and was home to thousands of deaths. At least 8,000 if we're really trying to be exact. The sanatorium was built in 1910 and the main patients that it dealt with were victims of the White Plague. Back then there was no known cure and many of the patients died to this disease. That wasn't the only way that they died here though. It is believed that doctors would use these dying patients as guinea pigs for some drugs or treatments that they were developing. However, oftentimes this would just result in the patient's death. After the White Plague had largely been dealt with, the space was transformed into a geriatric hospital. The liberties that the doctors and the nurses took, they got even worse when this happened. Electroshock therapy was utilized. Major injustices and mistreatments were done on the patients from the nurses. It really all went bad. In the 1980s, this spot was shut down for good, but by that point, the damage had already been done. Now Waverly Hills is one of the most haunted locations in America. People say that there are constant footsteps all over the place even though there's hardly anyone in the building. Doors will slam and lock when no one's even close to them. Phantoms and shadows will stalk people throughout the hallways of the building, seemingly waiting for a moment to strike. Screams and shrieks of former patients can be heard ringing throughout the corridors of the building. Many ghosts haunt the death tunnel, which was a place where they used to move the bodies of the dead. In room 502, there have been reported attacks on people, where they have felt their bodies seize up and get thrown to the ground. In that room, 2 nurses committed suicide. Apparently one of them jumped out of the window and the other one hung themselves because they couldn't live with the ongoing death that happened in this place. This building has seen way too many horrible things in its existence to just be a building anymore. Feel free to look it up on the internet if you're interested, but don't go visit this in person. Number 1 on this list is the Eastern State Penitentiary. This prison is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and when you hear the types of things that went on at this place, it's no wonder that it's haunted as badly as it is. The facility was built in 1829 and was in service for roughly 150 years. Now if this place had a motto, then it would have to be something about solitude. That was the theme at Eastern State Penitentiary: being alone. If you were a prisoner there, then you had your very own tiny little cell where you lived alone, ate alone, slept alone, and just existed alone. The thing is, it wasn't just the cell either. If you had to go to the washroom or leave the cell for any reason, then the guards would put a bag over your head and they would walk you to wherever you're going. The only thing that you will ever know if you go to this place is your cell. The mental strain that that amount of solitude would have had on those prisoners, it would have been insane. This wasn't the only form of punishment though. There were reports of chaining your tongue to your wrist and leaving you like that. They would dunk you in water and then they would hang you outside in the winter until your body literally froze. And honestly, there was a lot more horrible things that they did too that I don't even want to get into. Either way, due to all the horrors, due to all the death, due to all the atrocities that went on in these walls, the prison now boasts its fair share of ghosts. It is currently open to the public, however, I would not recommend going and checking it out. They have various cell blocks that are all known for different ghostly experiences. One of them has extreme echoing voices of laughter as if somebody was going insane. One of them has what it feels like evil shadowy figures jumping from wall to wall. The bloodthirst that these figures have is reportedly palpable. Another cell block has the visions of the dead faces that appear battered and bloodied right in front of you. Gary Johnson, who works to upkeep the prison, had a harrowing experience here before. He was opening up a cell block to clean it when all of a sudden his body stopped functioning and he was completely paralyzed but also totally aware. He felt as if spirits were invading his body and hurting his mind as he was frozen. Finally he was released and ran from the scene. This prison is haunted to its core and it must be avoided at all costs. Number 5 on this list is Tranquille Sanatorium in British Columbia. Tranquille Sanatorium has quite an extensive and tragic history to it, which has caused its walls to be the home to many undead spirits. A sanatorium, if you weren't familiar, is an establishment which has the sole purpose of housing those with long-term illnesses and is often associated with tuberculosis. The one that we're talking about right now is no different. It was built in 1907 as a facility to treat people with tuberculosis. However, it didn't stay like this for very long. The purpose of the facility eventually changed to become an insane asylum. It acted as this mental institute for a while until finally becoming abandoned in the late 1980s. Due to its deep history with death, disease, mental illness, it's no wonder that the Tranquille Sanatorium is now deeply haunted. The layout of this facility screams something out of a Stephen King book. It has several buildings that are connected by poorly lit underground tunnels. The building itself looks all too eerie from the outside as well, with dirty cream colored walls that have seen far better days as rot and mold slowly devour them. Visitors of this place report feeling extremely uneasy. A common note for most people that visit is the presence of orbs, strange balls of light that flutter throughout the building and then disappear. Some people have reported seeing a ghostly apparition on the 6th floor. This ghost takes the form of a woman not older than 30. She appears to be crying and screaming. The tunnels are said to be particularly haunted. People have reported screams coming from nowhere, flashes of movement, menacing and animalistic groans that make you feel as if somebody is right behind you. Children can also be heard playing every now and again in some of the more open areas of the building. Clearly, this place's dark history has impacted it greatly, and just because physical humans decided to abandon it in the 80s doesn't mean that it was truly abandoned for good. Number 4 on this list is the Firkins House. The Firkins House is part of Fort Edmonton Park, which, you guessed it, is located in Edmonton, Alberta. Fort Edmonton Park is a little tourist attraction that has buildings from 1885, 1905, and 1920 to represent the homes of the time. One of the houses is the Firkins House. This home is interesting because during my research, I couldn't find any particular evidence of wrongdoings or tragic events at this home. In fact, for the most part, it seems like a pretty normal house. People have lived there before and no harm has befell them, but it seems that after they moved out and the home was donated, that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. There are reportedly 3 ghosts or demons that haunt this home, each one scarier and more dangerous than the next. The first one is the ghost of a beautiful floating woman who is dressed in all white. People have said that they've spotted her in the windows of the home looking out at them or slowly drifting throughout the living room. The second one is the ghost of a little boy. The boy will appear to certain people looking extremely ill. It is currently unknown if this boy died in and around the area or what disease he is suffering from, but it is said that he resides in the home with the woman in white. The third being is by far the scariest of all 3. A ventriloquist dummy that will appear in the home or in the cupboards. This thing can move all by itself and talk by itself. It is very similar to the popular horror franchise Chucky, and it's said by some to be seeking to harm the living. I'm not sure if the ghost of the ventriloquist has taken over this dummy or if the dummy has taken on its own persona, but I definitely do not want to go anywhere where the primary residence is a demon puppet. Number 3 on this list is the Five Fishermen Restaurant. This is a restaurant in Halifax, Nova Scotia, known for its exceptional oysters and also its ghostly inhabitants. The ground that this restaurant sits on wasn't always utilized for serving up fish and chips though. In fact, it has a very long history. In the early 1800s is when the building went up, and for a long time it acted as the town's only school. Nothing ghoulish or demonic about that. However, at around the turn of the century, the school moved and the building took on a new purpose. It became the mortuary for Halifax and made its dealings with the dead. Now, not every mortuary is going to become haunted, but this one had quite a lot to deal with over the years. In 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sunk. It sunk roughly 640 kilometers off of the eastern shores of Canada, and therefore the closest places to assist with the rescue was these eastern provinces. Halifax acted as the leader in these rescue processes, and because of that, the mortuary had an onslaught of bodies of people whom had died on the ship. 5 years after that tragedy, Halifax incurred one of their own with the massive Halifax explosion. This was where a munitions ship exploded and it killed roughly 2,000 people just like that. This mortuary served as the primary designation for both of these incidents, and due to the unnatural deaths here, it makes sense that some spirits have clung on. Guests and employees alike have reported seeing ghosts all over this mortuary that turned restaurant. One of the dishwashers reported running out of the restaurant when he looked up from what he was doing and was staring directly at a ghost-like specter. The restaurant has attempted to have serious renovations done. However, I don't think that any amount of structural changes will get these spirits to rest for good. Number 2 on this list is the Frank Slide. Now, even though the Frank Slide sounds like it could be a fun, popular dance move that takes over TikTok for a few weeks, it is far more morbid than that. On April 29th in 1903, in the mining town of Frank, which at that time was part of the Northwest Territories but is now a section of Alberta, there was a horrible tragedy. 110 million tons of limestone and rock came tumbling down in one of Canada's biggest landslides ever. This fell onto part of the town of Frank. Frank was located right next to Turtle Mountain, which after extensive mining had grown unstable. On April 29th, it all came crashing down and claimed the lives of 70 to 90 people. It is still to this day Canada's most deadly landslide to ever occur in history, and was a horrible tragedy that can only remind us how fleeting life can be. I think the craziest part about this landslide as well is that it wasn't just miners who were killed. Their wives, their families, all of them died at the hands of the Frank Slide. The remains of these bodies were never recovered either, as the damage from the slide was far too devastating. Where all of this happened is now a section of a town called Crow's Nest Pass, and over a century later, the ghosts of the dead still haunt the area. This place is somewhere where visitors have reported feeling very unsafe. They say that the overall feelings of uneasiness are almost too much to bear and that they have to leave. Cries, howls, screams, this can all be heard late at night as you're trying to sleep. Lanterns will be seen in the night walking around at the hands of unknown apparitions. It is basically a full ghost town of people who never deserved to die in the first place, all wanting to get a second just to feel their lives again as they were so unfairly ripped away from them. Definitely one of Canada's most horrific tragedies, and now home to one of its most haunted locations. Number 1 on this list is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located in Banff, Alberta, and is truly one of the creepiest places that I've ever read about. Now, first off, I want to note the hotel itself looks gorgeous on the outside. The beautiful nature it is surrounded by is stunning, and the hotel gives me some serious Harry Potter Hogwarts vibes. However, when I say that this place is surrounded by nature, I really mean it. It is totally out on its own, with no other buildings in sight at all. The secluded site has been around for 132 years and has housed its fair share of visitors. Some of these visitors have had some incredible stays. I mean, when you look it up online, the hotel has a 4.7 Google rating, so I mean, it's pretty freaking good. Some of the guests, though, they never checked out. In the 1920s, a couple was set to have their wedding at this hotel. On the day of the ceremony, though, the bride, while she was walking down one of the hotel's beautiful marble staircases, tripped and fell, smacking her head on her descent and dying on the spot. This bride's spirit is one of the most notable sightings people have had when they're staying at this hotel. It's said that they often see a phantom in a wedding dress ascending and descending the stairs very quickly. She's also been seen in the ballroom dancing alone, potentially dreaming of the dance that she wanted so desperately to have with the husband that she never got to marry. In 1975, a longtime bellman of the hotel, Sam, died there. Since then, sightings of Sam have been pretty consistent. One story details how 2 women lost their room key and called the front desk to go and get it. The front desk person sent someone to go and open their room for these ladies. When that person had got there, though, the ladies were already in the room and said that another bellman had let them in. They described Sam to a T when they spoke about the bellman who helped them out. Instances like this have occurred time and time again at the hotel, with many people believing his spirit is still working there. Finally, with this hotel, you have room 873. Room 873 is rumored to be the home of a gruesome murder. One evening, a family was staying there, and the father, for some unknown reason, lost his mind, murdering his family and himself. After completely refurbishing the room, the hotel put it back in service, but now people who have stayed there report hearing the screams and the cries as if they were still dying. If you have to stay at this hotel, definitely avoid room 873.
Number 5 on this list is the Island of Dolls. This place has got to be one of the creepiest spots on the entire planet, if you ask me. Located in the canals near Mexico City, the Island of Dolls got its name from the residents that live in the trees. If you hadn't guessed already, those residents are creepy looking dolls. They weren't the only ones living living here in the past though. The haunting of this island is deeply tied with a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera. In the mid-20th century, Don Julian was living with his wife and children in Mexico City. However, for reasons unknown to us, he decided to leave his family and isolate himself on an island in Texulo Lake. He was completely alone on this island until he made a chilling discovery. The body of a young girl had washed ashore, and it was clear that she had drowned in this lake far earlier. This shook Don Julian to his core, and his already fragile mind was tested even more. Now, it's rumored that he believed the spirit of this girl was talking to him, that her ghost was haunting the island, and that she had a mission for him to accomplish. So when a doll floated through the lake and found its way onto the island a little bit after her body had been found, it fit into this narrative perfectly. Don Julian believed that the ghost of this girl could only be appeased if he took this doll and hung it from a tree on his island. He went and did this, but then his obsession for these dolls grew. Whether he was truly being haunted by this ghostly spirit or his mind had deteriorated to a point of no return is unknown, but we do know that he dedicated the next 50 years of his life to filling this island with dolls. Dolls that he found in the canals, in the garbage on the streets. Sometimes they were missing limbs or there was only a head left of them, but it didn't matter to Don Julian. He would still hang them regardless. Nowadays, the island is filled with thousands of dolls who look like they've seen far better days. What caps this story off and made its legend ripple through Mexican lore is the manner in which our island keeper died, drowning in Texulo Lake exactly how the young girl had done so 50 years earlier. Today, it is believed that his spirit, along with the young girls, remain on this island. Locals say if you were to visit this place, you must bring a doll of your own, or else the spirit of Don Julian will haunt you even after you leave. Number 4 on this list is the House of Mummies. The House of Mummies is a small museum that is home to a plethora of mummies. What makes this place so interesting is that no one intended for these bodies to be mummified. Guanajuato, where this museum is located, has a very unique climate and soil. In 1833, that region was going through a bad outbreak of disease and there were a lot of deaths. Some of the bodies that were buried during this time were later found to have been naturally mummified or had mummified themselves. People were fascinated and took them to a specific building which later has been transformed into a museum. Now, there's a lot of lore surrounding these bodies, but the general consensus is that there is still a bit of life to these mummies. People have reported feeling their living presence when they go and visit this museum. They've also said that they have felt them watching them as they go through or have noticed their bodies turn to look at them. It truly sounds like something straight out of a Scooby-Doo book, but then again, so does natural mummification. Locals even say that they believe some of the mummies sneak out of this museum sometimes and cause trouble in the night when nobody's looking. Number 3 on this list is Claudia Mirangro's house. Claudia was a woman with a decently easy life who had inherited a reasonable amount of money from her parents' passing. When she was younger, she got married, and she and her husband bought a home in the city of Querétaro. It was at this residence that they had their 3 children. Alfredo was the youngest, Anna was the middle child, and Claudia, named after her mother, was the eldest. Apparently, the family had some happy years living there, but that didn't last forever. Claudia Mirangro's mental state started to decline and she went down a bit of a rabbit hole. It got to a point where her husband could no longer stand his wife and he left her and the kids. Poor idea to leave the children in the hands of this woman though. On April 24th, 1989, the voices in her head got far too loud. She was convinced that she was possessed by a demon and that everyone in the city that they were living had turned into spirits. Her madness reached a point of no return, and as the voices beckoned her to do so, she grabbed a knife and went into her children's room, killing them one by one. Hours later, the police were called due to somebody reporting heavy crying. They found the mother covered in blood, mumbling to herself, clutching a bloody knife on the floor. She apparently doesn't remember the incident at all and wholeheartedly believes that a demon was controlling her actions. Claudia went to jail for a long time and is still there to this day, but her children's spirits, they didn't go anywhere. People have reported hearing screams and shrieks coming from that home. The pitter-patter of tiny childlike feet running through it. Someone even reported seeing what looked to be a demon child staring at them through the windows. A death like that from a demon-possessed mother has made this home one of the most haunted places in Mexico. Number 2 on this list is La Posada del Sol. La Posada del Sol is a hotel that is located in the center of Mexico City. Calling it a hotel is a little bit of a stretch though, because at this point it is completely out of commission, covered in graffiti, and a shell of its former self. Even though the exterior of this building has seen far better days, the inside inside still boasts incredible architecture, making people wonder what could have been. With over 600 rooms, a casino, a theater, a human-sized chessboard, galleries, and much more, this place had aspirations of being the finest hotel in Mexico. That dream was never fully reached though, as construction of the hotel was never finished and had to be halted in 1945. Fernando Saldana Galvan was the man behind this unfinished beauty. He envisioned this hotel to be a centerpiece of Mexico City, a place that people would flock to from around the world, a true beauty that would stand the test of time. Because of this, he poured his blood, sweat, and tears into this place. Problem is that a hotel of this caliber doesn't get made with blood, sweat, or tears. It gets made with money. In 1945, the hotel's construction was stopped because Fernando's debt was insurmountable. The stress and anxiety of never finishing his hotel and not being able to pay off his bills got the better of him, and he hung himself in the hotel yard. After his death, rumors began to sprout about the true intentions of this hotel. Some people stating that Fernando was actually part of a cult and this site was meant to be used as a place for satanic rituals. Other unfounded rumors surfaced that Fernando had actually killed his wife and kids before taking his own life. One thing is certain though, he definitely left this hotel haunted after he died, and not just by his spirit either. A girl was said to have been murdered in the basement at this hotel in its early days, and her spirit still haunts the walls as well. There's an altar in one of the top rooms of this place that people say you must leave candy on. If you don't, then you will be haunted by her undead spirit even after you leave. Number 1 on this list is Santa Paula Cemetery. The Santa Paula Cemetery is located in Guadalajara. The initial purpose of the cemetery was to be a spot designated for those who died of influenza and other epidemics that were ravaging Mexico. In the many years that it's been active though, lore surrounding the spirits that could be potentially living there has exploded. One of its most notable spirits is that of a young boy who died when he was 10 years old. The boy's name was Nachito, and he died over a century ago in 1882. One evening, a massive storm was sweeping through Guadalajara. This was a problem for Nachito though, because he was deathly afraid of the dark, so much so that he had to have 2 torches lit outside of his window every evening. That night when his parents sent him to sleep though, the torches went out due to the storm, and the next morning when his parents came to wake him, they found him dead where he slept. The cause of his death was a heart attack, and it was confirmed that Nachito got so scared of the dark that he had caused himself to have a heart attack and died. They had the funeral shortly after and buried him in the ground, but the next morning when his grieving mother came to visit him, the coffin had been taken out of the ground. His body was still inside the coffin, so they buried him again, except the same thing happened. In fact, they repeated this process 9 times before realizing that he can't be buried underground because he is too scared of the dark. Therefore, they made a special above-ground stone coffin that would always have access to the light. However, it is said that even though this coffin was made, his spirit still haunts the area. Another famous story about this cemetery is in regards to a vampire. Locals say that a vampire was killed by some people who drove a stake through its heart and then buried the body at this cemetery. A while later, the stone marking that had indicated where the vampire had been buried was cracked and a tree was growing through it. They say that if that tree ever dies, the vampire will return and seek vengeance on the people in surrounding areas. This is so rooted in the lore there that they've even built a fence around this tree so no one can come in and wreck it. There are a bunch more stories of how haunted this cemetery is, with sightings of demons and ghosts that I sadly do not have time to cover in this video, but I highly recommend looking this place up if you want a scare.
Coming in at number 5, we have Tower of London. The Tower of London is most famous for housing the crown jewels. It was also known throughout history for housing some famous prisoners in their final days before execution. It has been the center of many historical events, so it's no surprise that it's haunted by the ghosts of the past. One of the most famous ghost that haunts the tower is Guy Fawkes. As the rhyme goes, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Every November 5th, British people hold a bonfire to remember the gunpowder treason. In 1605, Guy Fawkes attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. He was hoping to kill the king. His plan was foiled when one of his conspirators told the police of the plan that night before the explosion was going to take place. Guy Fawkes was taken to the Tower of London while awaiting his trial. He was sentenced to be publicly executed and brought out to the square of the tower. He spent his last days in captivity activity in the tower as well as passing away there. Since then, there have been sightings or whispers of Fawkes from those visiting the towers, especially around the 5th of November when his spirit is the most restless. He is not the only famous ghost who is stuck around the tower. There have been many sightings of Anne Boleyn. She is often seen walking around various rooms after closing by security. Others have seen her staring through the window of the room which she was once imprisoned. A couple of guests have entered that room and heard a distant sound of a woman crying for help. It is believed her spirit is stuck here since her life was ended so tragically. Coming in at number 4, we have Pendle Hill. Pendle Hill might seem like a nice place for a hike in Lancashire, but there is much more than that to it. Since 1612, the land has been haunted due to the actions of the townspeople. The Pendle witch trials are among the most famous of the witch trials in English history. There were 11 on trial for the use of witchcraft. They were accused for being responsible for the deaths of 10 people who had recently passed. Only one of the accused was found not guilty, the other 10 were to be executed for their use of witchcraft. Once they were found guilty, they were each hanged for their crimes and buried under the hill. There was one witch in particular who was feared. She was referred to as Alice Nutter. She was wealthier than the other witches and was seen to have the most power. She shocked the town with her complete silence during her trial. These 10 witches now haunt the area. The people of East Lancashire remain cautious of the witches of Pendle Hill. It has been investigated by many ghost hunting teams. Once claimed that there are more than just the spirits of the witches in the area. They claimed there are also children and airmen who were bombed during the war. The area seems to attract tragedy and many have passed there. Locals refuse to go anywhere near the hill after dark as there have been so many sightings of the ghosts. Some have even seen the witches on the hill after dark. One local said they saw what looked like 10 women performing some kind of ritual. Could this be a tribute or the spirits of the witches attempting to communicate with the living? In at number 3 we have Theatre Royal. The Theatre Royal sits in London on Drury Lane. During the late 17th century, the theatre was one of the leading theatres in all of London. There were many famous actors who performed at the West End location on a regular basis. The theatre grew in popularity after the Second World War when they pioneered musicals such as Oklahoma, My Fair Lady and Miss Saigon. It is now owned by the famous composer Andrew Lloyd Webber. Although it's no longer the most prestigious theatre in London, it is one of the first and the longest open. Today it is open with the production of Frozen. What a classic. But it is still one of the most haunted locations in London. There have been many people who have passed through the hall since it opened in the 1700s. There are many stories of tragedies that happened here and spirits that could never leave. Although there have been ghostly sightings, the performers see it as an omen of good luck for an upcoming performance. So they're not so much feared but more so welcomed before a show. The most famous ghost is the Man in Grey. He is a tall man dressed from the 18th century with a top hat and powdered wig holding a prop sword as though he was about to step on stage to perform. There is a story told about why he haunts the theatre. Apparently the Man in Grey was preparing for his performance when he was stabbed. By who? We will never know. He then walked up into a side passage next to the royal viewing box. He was walled in so thick that no one heard him scream. It is unclear why anyone wanted to do this to the man. His remains were found over 100 years later and there was finally an explanation for all of the sightings. So if you happen to see him during your visit, try not to get too scared. It means the show will go well. Go see Frozen, it's gonna be a bop. Coming in at number 2 we have Hampton Court Palace. The palace was built in 1514 for Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, the chief minister of King Henry VIII. When the chief fell out of grace with the king, he gave him the palace in an attempt to save face for his family. It soon became the king's favoured residence. He then commissioned to have the palace expanded. It is one of the only surviving palaces out of the many the king owned. The house is currently owned by Queen Elizabeth II and the Crown. Today the palace is open to the public and a major tourist attraction. The palace is well known for its ghosts. This was a key selling point when open to the public. They knew that the ghosts who lived within the walls would give the guests a visit to remember. One of the most seen spirits is that of Jane Seymour, who died in 1537. She was the king's third and most beloved wife. She had given the king the son he had longed for. After Prince Edward was born, Jane passed due to complications with the birth. While delighted to have his son, the king was devastated at the sudden loss of his perfect queen. A pale figure in a long white dress is reported to appear on the Silver Stick stairs, which once led up to the room in which Jane gave birth and then passed away. Jane is not only one of King Henry's wives that haunts the halls, Henry's fifth queen, Catherine Howard, had also been seen around the halls. Catherine was known for her wild ways. Her ghost is also known to be more vocal and cited more often than that of Jane. Catherine was beheaded at the Tower in 1542. She was only 19 when she passed. She had been accused of adultery and treason. It is claimed that while she was being transported to the gallows, she broke free. She ran screaming through the halls, begging the king to have mercy on her. She never reached Henry and she would never see him again. It is said she now spends eternity screaming in anguish through those same halls. Coming in at number 1, we have Stonehenge. No one knows where Stonehenge came from. It has always been surrounded in mystery. Some archaeologists think it was created in 3000 BC to 2000 BC, but it's unclear how they would have the machinery to carve the stones or lift them into place. It is one of the most famous landmarks in the United Kingdom and is now protected to preserve it. It might be strange to believe now, but back in 1915 Stonehenge was up for public auction. Cecil Chubb had no intention to buy the landmark when he went to the auction that day. But when the bids were slow, he managed to win the land for $6,600. Although he had not planned on owning the land or the landmark, once he did, he wanted to restore it. It had fallen into neglect with its past owner and needed some maintenance. He decided that he would fence off the monument and begin charging 1 shilling for admission to pay for a guard and the restorations needed to restore it. There were a group of Celtic pagans named the Druids. They claimed that their people built the structure and used it as a place of worship. The group hoped to continue to hold their annual summer solstice ceremony there as they believed their ancestors did. The previous owner of Stonehenge had banned them for using it as it was on his land. This led the Druids to curse him. They said for as long as they're denied access to their sacred land, then the curse will follow the owner. Just 1 year after the curse, the owner lost his only son and heir to his fortune and land. 4 months later, he would pass away himself, leaving everything to his widow, who put the estate up for auction. Chubb was aware of the curse and did not want some fate to take his own family. He decided to gift Stonehenge to the British government, with one condition: that those who live near the monument visit it for free as he did as a child. It is said the curse still remains, along with the ghosts of the ancestors of the Druids who were buried there long ago. They watch over the land to make sure their descendants are still connected and no one is mistreating the sacred monument. To this day, the British government does allow the Druids to perform their ceremonies each year, until 2019 when the lockdowns forced them to cancel any and all in-person celebrations at Stonehenge. The senior Druid spoke out against this warning, saying that this move would not end well for anyone connected to the land. Yikes.